as me. I'm in it with TB. I'm in it before Dre. I just pull on me a hey, run it in my face. 500 rest in the safe, 500 rest in the blood. What you know about you and love? Rest in the safe, 500 rest in the blood. What you know about you and love? Oh, that's annoying. It's really annoying already. Let's see if I can fix the audio settings. Desktop audio. Yep. Because it should be capturing it, so. Oh, that's annoying. It's really annoying already. Oh, hello? Is it working now? Let me see if it was working before then, if that's the case. This one, don't do display audio. Desktop. And now we wait. Let me see if it was working before then, if that's the case. This one, don't do display audio. Desktop. And now we wait. See if it was working before then, if that's the case. This one, don't do display audio. Alrighty, it's working. It's working. That's good. I'm happy. Alrighty. So I'm back. It's been a little bit. Gotta upload off today, you know. If you haven't checked out that video, go check it out if you want. Yeah, no, I haven't streamed in a little bit. I'm sick, so pardon me if I sound nasally or less energetic than I usually do, which by comparison is barely any, but you know, I'll just continue. The next morning, actually, nah, no recap. The next morning at 6:30, as sunlight spread out across the sky, Souyjuro walked to school with Aoko in the chilly morning air. It was her intention to keep Souyjuro safe until he left the mansion. Nonetheless,
6時から登校とか、あんたも働き者ね。
そうでもないよ。30分仕出しを手伝うだけだし。
I mean, at that point, if you're doing a 30-minute shift, what's the point, right? You're not getting any money. His work ethic was a little too strong for a student entering finals.
それより青崎、無理してないか？別にこっちに付き合うことないんだぞ。
ご心配なく、生徒会室で仮眠取るから。約束だし、もうまでは一緒に行くわよ。
But internally, Aoko was worried. What traps did her roommate have in store for him? She could not imagine Alice had planned anything to go down in the woods, but she wanted to be safer than sorry. The least she could do was accompany Souyjuro to school. That much she was firmly committed to. Any traps that presented themselves could be dealt with on the spot. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't mention it, but like, shout out Aoko for keeping to her word, even though she's not doing it to be nice. She's just doing it. But internally, we know like she's just being nice. It's just her way of showing it, and it's like, it's it's a teenage girl, so it's like she probably could do it better, but it's like, who really cares, right? Sojuro's not stressing about it. Well, not dealt with, so much is destroyed. Since that was Aoko's forte, that'll be enough to keep him safe for the time being.
帰り道に関してはアリスもそこまで暇ではないと信じるしかないんだけど。
Oh. If Alice was willing to put all her energy into a new trap after the first had failed, then they were as good as dead anyway. But Aoko would cross the road when she came to it. It all depended on how deep Alice's dislike of Souyjuro really went. It would have to be enough to make her abandon her pride as a witch, something she had protected fervently until now. If that were the case, Aoko knew she would never be able to keep him safe. The moment 24/7 protection became necessary was the moment she had failed. Her character led her to focus on what she could do in the here and now and ignore the rest. And this current plan of hers was her best attempt at doing right by everyone. They left behind the Koonji estate, and the two remained together until the residential area at the bottom of the hill, where Aoko glanced casually at Souyjuro. Excuse me. Surprisingly, Souyjuro saw through her harmless question and sensed the bigger issue. How is he going to win Alice over? In fact, he had been thinking about that very question. According to his friend, there were 3 basic approaches he could take. One was the roundabout approach.
こいつは時間がかかるが最も自然だ。人間ってのは自分が好きなものを大切にされるとコロッと気を許しちまう。仲間意識ってやつだな。
I mean, it's not wrong. It shows that you care. In other words, instead of focusing on the person one wishes to win over, one should focus on their interests. It was a surprisingly mature opinion coming from Kinomi. Unfortunately, Souyjuro had no idea what sort of things Alice liked. She seemed very fond of the mansion, but what could he do? Oh, excuse me, Oh, I can't talk. But what could he do? Clean it for her? He sensed that would have a reverse effect. He had a distinct feeling she would not want him touching what was precious to her. The second approach was to take the inner track.
でもやっぱり本人を落とすのが一番早い。俺たちに魅力がないのなら、魅力のある外付け装備に頼るのだ。そう、プレゼントなんだよ、しずきくん。
A quick and dirty strategy, the assassin's strike. Manipulate someone's feelings with an expensive gift. To Souyjuro, this sounded like his best chance. The approach was easy for him to grasp, and he appreciated its simplicity. However, he had the same concerns as with the first approach. A step was missing, and without a step, the plan was bound to fail.
あとはまあ剣ってやつ。俺にはよくわかんないけどさ、やりすぎると悪い印象を持たれるとか殿下が言ってたな。私今落とされてるって意識させちゃダメなんだとよ。付き合った後であれ私落とされたと気づかせるのが上等なんだとか。
This is the most natural and honestly the most common. The soldier did not quite grasp the details of He understood the basic idea. Don't press your luck. He knew that much was good advice. He would have to try extremely hard to get on Alice's good side. He could tell it would be a long process to get there. Souyjuro recalled the time he had wandered inside a fox territory in the mountains. He had left some food on the ground for the fox, and then it never bothered him again. What is considered goodwill and kindness varies from person to person. But if there is enough goodwill from one side, regardless of whether that goodwill is reciprocated, the other side will eventually start to feel an obligation to do so. That was key.
大丈夫。考えてるよ。とりあえず自分にできることとかしたいことをしようと思う。安心してくれ。青崎に忠告されたことすらきちんと守る方針だ。
Sojo seemed ready to face things head on. His answers did little to reassure Aoko, however. She found herself more concerned about his safety than ever before. Oh man.
学校にあるようなほうきが欲しい。
Oh.
そうなんだ。できれば安く買えるところ。
We meet a new character. I've been waiting for her to show up actually. So I don't remember her name, but I think once the side stories come back, we'll get to learn more about her. But I can't believe it took like to chapter 6 already.
しずきの家、アパートよね。ほうきなんてもの必要とは思えないけど。
いや、ちょっと気になるところがあって掃除がしたいんだ。ゴミ袋もあると助かる。
無駄な出費はできないって言ってたくせに。まあどうでもいいけど、うちのでよければ使う？貸してあげましょうか？
多分1日じゃ終わらないから自分で買うよ。元から欲しかったものだし、あると便利だよ、ほき。
Sojo was on his way home from his part-time job after school. It was 4 in the afternoon, 2 hours earlier than his part-time job would have normally ended. The Mad Bear's head chef had gotten into trouble with the accountant for making a student work the day before exams. Thus, Sojo's boss had tearfully sent him home early. And that is when it happened. The interruption to his standard schedule must have been just the shock he needed. Normally, he would meet up with Aoko after she was done with student council affairs to go home with her. However, today Sojo was asking the other students who worked at the same place if they knew any shops in the area where he could buy a broom.
田舎者の趣味って理解不能ね。水郷すぎ。うちの近くにまっついラーメン屋あるでしょ。あそこの通りを終わりまで行けば起きたって金物店がある。一式揃えるなら西口のホームセンターより安く上がるわ。どうでもいいけど、私のチャリ使う？どうせ試験明けまで使わないし。
Sojo's eyes lit up as if he had met his savior. Biking uphill to the mansion, let alone with a package to carry, was not a pretty thought.
いや、自転車には乗ってみたいけど、今回は遠慮するよ。じゃあ、
Kumari?
また明日、学校で。
I think that's her name, Kumari? Saying farewell to his coworkers, there was only one. There was only one here, what do you mean? He headed to the hardware store. He needed a cheap and sturdy bamboo broom and a large dustpan to go with it. If possible, a pushcart and a stick for, a stick for a splint would have been nice too. As it happened, Sojo wanted quite a few things. Alice returned to her work after waking up from her nap. The Koonji estate had an annex that housed the library. The library was full of books handed down to her from her mother, so it was Alice's territory such that even Aoko dare not enter. If the mansion was a witch's abode, left behind by the times, the library was a fairy tale quarters, lost to the ages. It was a natural sanctuary for the young witch who could command ploys to do her bidding. She relied on her memory to recall the location of each book on the many shelves, and then she saw it. Upon raising her head, she was met with the most unusual of sights. Her elegant eyebrows bristled in distaste. From that moment, she failed to accomplish anything she had planned for that day. She was instead forced to stare at the strange sight outside her window, eyebrows fixed in that position until the sun set. I'm so sorry for the background noise, by the way, I can't control that. Moving into the Grand Mansion on the hill had not brought any major changes to Sojo's day-to-day schedule. He woke up, went to his part-time job, ate breakfast, and went to school. Classes came and went, still strange and new, broken up by rare and brief moments of rest until the school day ended. He left school, went to his part-time job, slept, woke up, and studied for exams. A modest life for a modest young man, continuing every day in the same fashion despite his best efforts to change his fortune. But nothing ever really changes. Whether Aoko was by his side in the mansion, as was frequently the case, or whether Alice was making him drink some potion she prepared before going to bed. The former was an attempt by Aoko to make him feel better. The latter was some attempt to keep him safe, even if he did not fully appreciate it. Then one day, a day like any other, while Souyjuro was pouring himself some tea as he worried over the lack of change in his life, his relationship with Alice was the same as ever. There was one major change this morning. He was drinking black tea instead of green. Though there were all sorts of different types of tea to be found in the kitchen, a newcomer to the world of tea like Souyjuro could not tell one of them from the next. Naturally, his tea-making skills were limited to tea bags, one of which he placed in his cup before returning to the dining table. Alice and Aoko were already seated. The two were eating in silence. In his household, it was everyone for themselves when it came to breakfast. The diplomatic description of their breakfasts would be simple. The more accurate description would be 2 slices of stale bread prepared in seconds. Aoko exchanged a word or two with Alice, took a sip of tea, and stood up from her seat. Since it was winter break for the high schoolers, Alice, she returned to her room after eating, as normally she did, while Aoko headed to the front door, shoes in hand, ready for school. Oh, it was just for her. Okay. After hurriedly cleaning the table, Souyjuro rushed out the door after Aoko. Together they walked down the long hill in the direction of the school. They had spent 3 days following this very simple routine.
ところで、あれから動きはあった?
School had ended, and evening had arrived. Buttered bread roll in one hand, Alice replied with a simple, silent shake of her head.
そう。ならあっちも次の手を考えているんでしょうね。
Oh.
そう。ならあっちも次の手を考えているんでしょうね。魔術師本体の居場所は見当ついてる?
Her response is exactly the same. Without showing the slightest sign of dejection, she continued to chew the roll and took a stab at her salad.
そう。私も試験が終わったら手伝うから、それまで悪いけど一人でやってて。今日からあのバカを一夜漬けにしなくちゃいけないんで余裕ないの。
Alice's face grew dour as if she had something to get off her chest.
問題ないでしょ? アリスはもう休みに入ってるんだから、一日全部使えるじゃない。
Alice was indeed on vacation and could spend all day every day on her work as a mage. And she had spent the past few days holed up in a library instead. She was hardly devoting herself to dealing with the challenger, as Aoko put it.
アリス? 聞いてる? 分かってる。今夜からそっちもやるから。
Sighing, she stood up. What was bothering Alice? What was it she wanted to say? What had she been doing only 2 hours earlier? The young witch took her leave from the breakfast table without offering a single clue. Misaki High was a private school, and as such its winter break started earlier than public schools. The end of term ceremony was in mid-December, followed by a brief respite before the next term began. Of course, that was if and only if they overcame the classic obstacle line between them and the extended break from school, final exams. The radio continued its broadcast late into the night. A thermos of hot tea illuminated the need to venture down the kitchen. An electric blanket kept away the winter cold, and a crab-shaped pastry staved off any dinnertime hunger. Those are the lengths Aoko had gone to. She needed to ensure that every aspect of her surroundings helped her pull a successful all-nighter.
期末試験1日目、ご苦労様。それで、生まれ変わる覚悟できた?
Oh, Souyjuro, you goofball. Good. Sorry, I just had to put on something in the background so I can block out the noise. Alrighty, let's see what you're doing, Souyjuro. Souyjuro nodded earnestly. Upon returning from work, he encountered not the maid she expected, but the Demon Student Council President Aozaki. Half a day earlier, the first day of exams were over. Souyjuro was about to head back to the mansion where he hoped to put his plan into practice. 1.
今夜私の部屋で監禁ね。
That's normal. That's normal to say to someone.
夕方からのアルバイトは当然キャンセル。ちょっと本気であの点数はありえないから。
It's the fact that like you have normal Aoko, you have student council president Aozaki, and you have Aoko Aozaki the maid. It's just like 3 different versions of her. A cold blue grin greeted him in the hallway. Clenched in her fist was Sojuro's exam paper. Mr. Yamashiro had no doubt said,
転校してきたばかりだし、しょうがないよね。
but she had snatched the exam out of the teacher's hand the minute he tried to show her. That was how Soujuro had ended up in Aoko's room instead of the room in the attic to which he was accustomed. Though her situation was far from normal, at the end of the day, she was an adolescent girl like any other. Naturally, she felt uncomfortable letting a boy her own age into her room. However, his grades were truly something that called for desperate measures. That explained why her mood was even worse than normal today, and the vein on her forehead was pulsing visibly with anger. Huh. Oh man, alrighty. I'll be your boyfriend in your wet dreams tonight. Peekaboo, I just put some boogers in my chain. Peekaboo, any pointers like a Kobe game. Peekaboo. This whole like catching pasta. Peekaboo. Alrighty. Had to check.
先に自分の復習済ませる。あんたはそのテーブル使ってて。
Aoko turned her back to him and sat down at her favorite desk. Soujuro was left standing before a cheap, I thought that said something else, well, a cheap looking glass table.
なんかいろいろと慣れないな。 なあ青崎、この青いのなんだ？
Restless, Souyjuro found his eyes drawn to the guitar propped up in the corner.
なんか薄いし青いしとんがってるし、きっと青崎のことだし、もしかしなくても武器か？
楽器よそれ。エレキはともかくアコギは音楽室で似たようなのあったでしょ。あとこれ以上青々言ったらそのとんがってるので殴るからね。
Souyjuro plopped himself down into the cushion, struggling to suppress the desire to retort that it was the weapon after all.
ちょっとは落ち着きなさいよ。いつもは耳の遠い大型犬みたいに鈍感なくせに。何？
Man, it's so annoying.
ちょっとは落ち着きなさいよ。いつもは耳の遠い大型犬みたいに鈍感なくせに。何か気になるものでもあるの？
I'm not crazy, that pause was really long. In fact, it was Aoko who was oblivious for once. For his part, Souyjuro could not figure out why he felt so restless either. Suffice to say, they were both pretty clueless in this moment.
もしかして内装？この部屋の家具のグレードが今とは違うから不思議がってるのね。ここベッド以外は私の家から持ち込んだものなの。引っ越してから2年経つけどまだ屋敷には馴染んでないでしょ。
Though she misunderstood the real reason for Sojuro's nervousness, Aoko seemed satisfied that she had resolved Sojuro's anxiety for the time being and returned to her studies. She flipped through her notes and textbooks as if fast-forwarding a tape. There was no opening for an outside like him to intrude in her high-speed study session. Repelled by her intensity, he retreated to his table. He was like sensitive enough to pick up on her desire to be left alone. It was a testament to Soujuro that having his needs utterly ignored was now second nature to him, to the extent that he could now happily go about his business in solitude. 2 hours passed. Then as the clock neared 11, Aoko's speed and concentration began to slip. Seeing his window of opportunity, Soujuro seized the moment to strike up a
青
conversation.
崎、ちょっといいかな？
何？
She spoke hesitantly, not bothering to turn to face him. She continued to flip the pages of her textbook, albeit at a slower speed than
こ
before.
の3日間、青崎たちの夕食事情を見てきたけど、君たちの食事はいつも青なのか？
そうだけどおかしい？
そう言われると困るな。ただ学校じゃみんな楽しそうだった。誰かと食事をとるってことはああいう風になることだって思ってた。だからもしかすると。
もしかしないわよ。別にあんたのせいでアリスと話さないわけじゃないわ。私たちはいつもああだから。
Aoko spoke calmly with her back still turned, seemingly unaware of what he was getting at.
張り詰めた食卓だな。青崎とアリスは仲がいいと思ってたのに。
She neither confirmed nor denied this statement. She was, however, surprised by the disappointed tone in which he had made it.
張り詰めた食卓っていうのは合ってるわね。アリスが何回あんたの飲み物にメスカリンを入れてたかなんてもう覚えてないし、昨日なんか堂々とサラダの中に7かまどなんか混ざってるし。ほんと、あの子何考えてるんだろう。
A bitter smile spread across her face to reminisce. The pages of her textbook continued to turn.
メスカリン？
サボテンから取れるアルカロイドよ。アリスが使う以上、ただの幻覚剤じゃないでしょうけどね。と、私はこんなもんでいっか。
With that, she slammed shut her fourth textbook of the night. After having scarcely changed position the whole night, she finally turned to her chair to face him.
さあ、今度はあんたを仕込まなくちゃね。今日の4科目の答案、実に総十郎らしい出来栄えでそっと押しそうになったわ、私。
Her tone was light, but her gaze was heavy as she stared at Soujuro, seated cross-legged on the floor.
原告、地理、数学、電子工学。あの調子であと2日続けたら冬休みが消えるのは当然でしょうね。そうなると困るのは私なのよ、実際。
いや俺も困るぞ。休みなのに学校に行くのはなんか気が乗らない。
Souyjuro calmly corrected her.
そりゃあ私のセリフだ。あんたが学校に行くってことは必然こっちまでとばっちりが来るっての。
All she could think about, as much as she tried not to, was Mr. Yamashiro and his annoying grin.
それ以前に私の目が黒いうちはオール赤なんてやつは許さない。本来なら少年から叩き直すところだけど、ま、あんたはいろいろ事情があるからとりあえず点数だけで勘弁してあげる。私もテストは一夜漬けで片付ける方だから、あんた一人仕込むのにそう時間はかからないだろうし。
Sojuro's expression openly soured in response to her declaration. It was obvious he did not think he needed her meddling in his studies.
あんたね、苦労するのは私とあなた、どっちだと思う？
Soujuro got the feeling that it would be him, but he nodded slowly nonetheless. Then again, it would probably take more effort on her part than on his. And in his case, he knew there was no way to talk her out of it.
この度はご迷惑をおかけします。
Soujuro summarily bowed his head to show gratitude and willingness to work.
よろしい。安心なさい。私だって鬼じゃないから。別に平均点狙うってわけでもなし。予定通りこなしていけば3時には眠れるわよ。
She nodded with satisfaction, pleased by his studious attitude. He had plenty of obstacles ahead of him, but a sense of humility might be enough to see him through.
って何仏心出してるんだ私。いいしずきくん。この後頼られちゃたまんないから釘刺しておくけど、私がマンツーマンで誰かを仕込むなんてことめったにないから。これはあくまで異例中の異例だって覚えておいてね。
She spoke more to convince herself than him, but his expression still darkened. It made one want to hang a cider. It made one want to hang a cider on his neck. Okay, yeah, it's a spelling error. I wasn't bugging. It made one want to hang a sign around his neck that read, "Please take me home," like an abandoned pet. Aoko chided herself for being so soft. For some reason, in that moment, she recalled that it had been raining the day they met each other. Time passed like the falling grains of an hourglass. It seems like they didn't finish by 3. Aoko squinted as light poured through the window and she downed another cup of tea. She had lost count on exactly how many she had drank long ago.
一晩かかったね、大崎。
Soujuro picked up on what she left unspoken. Aoko had used up all her pep. His staying up all night, but also shouting at him. He looked pale and uncomfortable, just as he had all night long.
甘く見てたわ、あんたのこと。
だから褒めても何も出ないって。
ある意味褒めるに値するかもね。
She was at the end of her rope, but she could not help the bit of pride that swelled up in her. His lack of even the most basic comprehension was shocking, even taking into account his upbringing in the wilderness. His ability was that of a middle school student, and that was being generous. It's so mean. Preparing him for exams by teaching him new concepts and ideas was a waste of time. Rote memorization was his only hope of passing. Everything he memorized could collapse like a house of cards afterwards, for all she cared, so long as he remembered for his exams. Assuming he had the capacity to be a good student in the first place had been her mistake. I almost thought it was like Persona 4 music for a second. It was crazy. It took all night to cover the content for just 4 exams. As she still did not feel confident he could apply what he so earnestly tried to memorize.
でもね、真面目なのはいいことだけど、あんた暗記するのに時間かかりすぎ。
そこは多めに見てほしい。今まで頭より体で覚えることのが多かったんだ。
Aoko let out an exasperated sigh. Naturally, physical prowess mattered more in mountain life than intellectual kind, but still.
まあいいわ。これで山城からあんたの成績について相談されることもないでしょうし。紅茶もう一杯入れてくれる？
Souyjuro stood up and obeyed, as Aoko stretched her aching back. She had apparently bought the tea bags in bulk, so there was still plenty to use.
まったく無駄遣いだな、青崎は。
He spoke under his breath so she wouldn't hear. Made him so happy to see her so tired and unfocused after the grueling all-night lesson she had given him. It did not cross his mind that the excess tea bags, far from being an indulgent purchase, were purchased intentionally to sustain them through the night. A relaxed expression came across Aoko's face as she watched him, naive and peaceful as he could be.
悪くないけど、せめてリーフティーで入れられるように仕込まなくちゃダメかな。
Seeming to have overheard her not so inner monologue, Souyjuro made to face her.
やっぱり味は違うのか？
違う違う、もう全然。ま、正直私はどうでもいいんだけど、アリスはね、かなりお茶にはうるさいよ。そうだ、宗十郎、アリスとうまくいってる？
Aoko cheerfully slumped over the table, not covered with textbooks and scribbled notes. Souyjuro watched her with a hint of resentment in his eyes.
彼女と会えるのは食事の時だけで、食事と言ったらあれだろ？どうやって仲良くなれって言うんだ？
そう？私は十分脈ありだと思ったけど、そっちはアリスを怖がってないし、アリスはそっちを追い出す理由を見つけようと躍起になってるし、いい条件よ、これって。
全然わからないな。あの子とこっちの関係は遊園地前の青崎と俺の関係と同じじゃないか。一体どこがいい条件なんだ？
とりあえず反目し合ってはいないでしょ。一方通行の関係だけど、それはそれ。アリスにしちゃ上出来っていうか、理由を探している時点で可能性ありってね。あの子は反感に応えることが癖になっちゃってるから、大抵相手を自滅させちゃうのよ。
Her ominous words only confused Souyjuro further.
知ってしまえば単純な話なんだけどね、あの子の場合。ただ
Whether or not he could put it into practice was another story altogether.
難しいよ、青崎は。
He carried her teacups back to the table as he spoke. Aoko picked hers up and took a sip as if to dispel her exhaustion.
でも確かに君の言う通りだ。俺はまだあの子の顔しか知らない。クオンジ・アリスという名前すら定かじゃないのは問題があるね。
He followed Aoko's lead and took a sip of his own. His cup contained not tea, but plain hot water. Why?
あの子のこと教えてほしい？
Aoko scrutinized him carefully as she sat. Most boys would have been captivated by her gaze in that moment.
いや、そういうことは本人に聞いてあげるべきだと思う。
But he ignored her and stared straight ahead as if speaking directly to Alice herself.
そうね。ほんと、あんたってアリス好みの対応をするわ。ねえ、前から気になってたけど、客室でアリスに何を言ったの？いくら私との約束とはいえ、あの子が部外者を半日も放置するなんてありえないのよ。
He thought back to that moment. He could recall only 2 or 3 words he had exchanged with Alice after awakening in the guest room. He did not recall the conversation being anything special, but he could not bring himself to casually share with Aoko now. After all,
ねえ、どんなセリフであの子の気を変えたの？
Aoko eagerly pressed him for answers. Souyjuro frowned, unsure of what to say. He did not know what the interaction had been like for Alice, but for him it had felt special, sacred almost. The question was, why and for whom was he so concerned?
ほら、白状しなさいってば。隠し事なんて似合わないわよ。
Her disconcerting smile moved even closer. Souyjuro did not look like he was about to stay silent much longer, as he would eventually come to realize Aoko Ozaki had sometimes troubling propensity to gossip.
まあ、あの子と何を話したかは言わないけど、 今の青崎に比べれば花もロマンもなかったのだけは確かかな。さっきまでは青崎が鬼みたいだったからいいもんだなって気がつかなかった。
I don't think she's gonna like that. He stared directly into her eyes as he spoke. Aoko nearly leapt out of her seat in panic. Now that he pointed it out, she realized their bodies were practically touching.
仕方ないでしょ、この方が効率良かったんだから。あんた横にいないとすぐ間違えるし。
Aoko stood up as she lashed back at him.
そうだね。なんか昔みたいで久しぶりに集中できた。これが異例中の異例っていうのが本当に残念だ。
余裕あるじゃん。その分じゃ今日のテストだけじゃなくアリスとの話し合いもうまくいきそうね、宗十郎。
あ、それはもちろん。
His cool response caught her off guard, and for a moment she was at a loss for words. She meant it sarcastically, and yet he responded with a warm smile.
方針変更だ。まずは近くで話しかけてみるよ。嫌なことはいずれ終わるって分かったから。
Aoko remained in a state of silent shock as he spoke and rose to his feet. She could not help but feel a reluctant respect for what seemed to be his newfound confidence and competence.
とりあえず今日は一人で帰ってアリスと話してみる。青崎は放課後生徒会だろ。
He was right. It was the last meeting before winter break. Normally, he would have waited until the meeting ended or else gone straight to his part-time job. This was part of Aoko's plan to make sure he and Alice were never alone in the mansion together.
待った。まさかあんた一人でアリスとやり合うつもりなの？
別にやり合うつもりはないぞ。し合っても勝てないだろう、アリスには。
His reply made complete sense, which floored her.
でも青崎がいたら話が複雑になるのは目に見えてるんだ。そんなわけで今日はゆっくり飛び丸の相手もして。
本気？
He felt like he was being tested, but nodded nonchalantly nonetheless. Knowing how grave the situation really was, Aoko was not sure how to respond to his apparent lack of concern. The morning light coming through the window marked a stark contrast between the two. Which stood bathed in light, which lurked in darkness, then went without saying. The silence lasted for only a brief moment. Staring at him gravely, she said,
そう。なら止めはしないわ。
That was all she had. Her dry tone hid the significance of their pregnant silence, not revealing the slightest sign of discord.
なんか怒ってないか、青崎。
別に。それで何か考えはあるの？下手な考えは通じないわよ、あの子には。
Souyjuro furrowed his brow in deep thought. He knew it would be hard to get close to her through talk alone. In fact, it felt near impossible.
言葉で落ちないやつは物で釣れ。
Kenobi had been the voice of wisdom and folly for him countless times in the past. Incidentally, Kenobi had been referring to Aoko at the time he shared that pearl of wisdom. But Souyjuro had the distinct impression that trying to buy Aoko's kindness with gifts would not end well.
アリスの真意がわからないじゃないか。考えてみると今の自分と彼女はまるで接点がない。
Souyjuro crossed his arms at a loss.
いつものことだけど何も考えてなかったわけね。
うん。でもまああれこれ考えなくてもいいと思う。アリスにはあれこれ説明するとか分かってもらおうとかそういうんじゃなくて、なんていうか。
He pondered intently as he tried to put his vague thoughts into something concrete, but he did not spend much time in thought. With a nod, he concluded.
要は俺が彼女を好きかどうかってことじゃないか。
He articulated that which is often so hard to say, with surprising clarity and calm. It was certainly a prerequisite for the task he hoped to achieve. He had no hope of making her appreciate him with words, or with acts of giving, with the expectation of reciprocation. He simply wished to get to know her better because he liked her. That was his honest, uncontrived intention, and it reflected the purity of his heart. But whether that was in his best interest or not was another story altogether. calculation and compromise, selfishness and conflict. Purity such as his often irritated people who believed that morals went against human nature, or rather, people who were inevitably forced to believe it. Aoko silently walked away without responding to what Soujuro said. Her long hair swung from side to side as she passed him.
Ozaki?
Noting her strangely cold manner, he called out to her. However, she was already opening the door to leave.
下でシャワー浴びてくるから、あなたは自分の部屋に戻ってて。
Her words lacked any expressive inflection. In his confusion, all Soujuro could do was
いいけ
nod.
ど、やっぱり怒ってないか、青崎。
Emotion returned to her face as he spoke. Yet it was not the typical irritated look which he had grown so accustomed.
そうね。あんた流に言えば、多分私は怒ってる。何に対してのものかは、あんまり言いたくないけど。
Poor Soujuro did not even realize that he himself was the reason. She looked at him, and for an instant he witnessed an emotion on her face of which he had never seen. Like, I can't talk today, good lord. She looked at him, and for an instant he witnessed an emotion on her face of which he had never seen the likes of before.
じゃあね。これが最後になるかもしれないから、お別れぐらいは言っておくわ。あなたはアリスを甘く見すぎてる。でも、それが同時にあんたの強みなのよね。私たちには毒にしかならないけれど。
The door slammed loudly shut behind her. Her steps were audible as she walked away on the other side of the wall. The corridor must have been nearly freezing without any central heating. Balko seemed pretty comfortable, or seemed perfectly comfortable.
なんで私から出ていくんだ。
I say this is her room.
順番が逆。普通先に出てくのはそっちじゃない。
Aoko promptly kicked Soujuro out of her room. Once again, the wooden door closed with a slam. The corridor was not as cold as he had expected. Not quite as bad as the freezer, at least. The second day of the exams ended and Soujuro was on his way back to the mansion. The road grew steeper and the woods thicker as he made his way up the familiar slope. People in Tal called it not a hill, but a mountain, simply because it took over 20 minutes to climb. This did not sit well with Soujuro, for whom a mountain was something that could not be overcome so easily. The road was paved, for one thing, and the canopy overhead let in plenty of sunlight to guide the way. None of the inclines were especially steep, and no animals lurked in the underbrush. There was no chance of losing his way, and no reason to worry about getting lost.
情けない。まだ未練ばっかりだ。
Soujuro quietly reprimanded himself for getting so wrapped up in his own little world. In the past few weeks since moving here, he had been so constantly comparing the town with his former mountain home. Normally he would not get upset over it, but in recent days since meeting Aoko, as it happened, he had become rather hung up on the differences. The reasons for this eluded him, but he knew that Aoko was a force that could not be stopped. What is going on? What the heck? Bugging out. Oh man, I heard it. This actually made him want to quicken his own pace. The mansion where they both lived was the antipathy of her lively. Oh man, how did I graduate high school? Good lord. Oh, how did I graduate college? Yeah. The mansion where they both lived was the antipathy of her lively personality. It stood out like a sore thumb, even in a town like Misaki. Some people said it was haunted. There were no ghosts, per se, but it was inhabited by magicians, so their claims were closer to the truth than they could have possibly known.
そういえば、幽霊と魔法使いっていうのはどっちが常識外れなんだろ
Lost in contemplation as he was, the boy failed to notice how his own lack of familiarity with city life played into the equation. In any case, none of his pondering changed what needed to be done. Tomorrow was the last day of exams. That meant he had only a little longer until Aoko stopped taking responsibility for his safety. If possible, today was going to be the day when the mansion's owner accepted his continued residence here. Souyjuro slipped between the trees, encircling the mansion, and walked down a naturally tree-lined avenue that led him to the front door. Here goes. Oh, what the heck? Was he going to say that? He was.
う。よし。
Okay, there you go. Taking a deep breath, he stepped across the threshold. The drawing room was where he expected to find Alice. However, he found himself face to face with the most unexpected scene. A few steps in, he arrived at the large foyer extending from the mansion's entrance. But one thing was clearly out of place. The foyer of the mansion was like a hall in a medieval castle. It was illuminated by the cold winter sun casting down through the skylight, unaided by artificial light. The wooden tiles smelled of the outdoors. And there was Alice, dressed in all black, huddled against a column so enormous it resembled a sharply cornered tree trunk. The mansion was quite literally supporting her frail body, like a mother's lullaby or a gently rocking cradle. The heavy atmosphere within this old building suppressed even the slightest stir, almost as if warding away any disturbance to her slumber. There she slept in the shadows of home. Hidden away from outsiders, her sleeping figure was enough to mesmerize anyone who lays eyes upon her. Souyjuro instinctively looked up at the ceiling out of sheer awkwardness. He wanted to surprise her, but not in this way. Her slender frame lay asleep by the fireplace. The scene was as beautiful as a painting, yet hard on his heart at the same time. Her slumbers seemed breathless. She was too still, with not even a hint of movement, and yet slumped against that frigid column under the cold winter sky, happiness appeared to be her blanket. A passerby would not be blamed for thinking she was in that most peaceful state of eternal slumber, death. I mean, are you gonna check if she's dead or not? You might have to. Souyjuro spoke to himself as he gazed idly upon her. Bringing her a blanket or something warm did not so much as cross the boy's mind. Instead, as odd as it sounds, first thing he thought to do was to go prepare some tea. Oh, sure. He made sure to be quiet as possible as he opened the drawing room door. On the table waiting for him were 3 pills. They were the medicine Aoko required him to take every day when he arrived home. Gulping down the vaguely sweet pills and continuing on to the kitchen, he selected a box of tea from among the many in the cabinet and brewed enough for 2 people. Alice was still asleep when he returned to the foyer. Careful not to make any noise, he crouched close to the ground. He was startled by how cold the floor felt through his pants. Let me check something real quick. Yep, it's capturing my audio, that's fire. Put on the news. Leave it on Lucy-san. Put on the news. Okay, so it's only been almost an hour. Alrighty, I can keep going. Probably stop like at 10 or something, who knows. He was startled by how cold the floor felt through his pants. Well, not 10, probably 9 or something, who knows. He was startled by how cold the floor felt through his pants. He thought it would be warmer here by the fireplace, but then again he recalled how Aoko had referred to it as the useless hole in the wall. What was likely the case was that neither she nor Alice knew how to use it properly. After taking the teacups from the tray and placing one in front of each of them, Souyjuro carefully pulled his textbook on classical literature from his satchel.
青崎怒ってたからな。
He could still see her angry face from this morning. The reason for her anger was still as much a mystery as the unusual look he saw briefly come across her face. In any case, one thing was certain: he needed to start studying for tomorrow. Thanks to Aoko's instruction, today's exams went well enough, but tomorrow's would be even more formidable challenge. After how angry she was this morning, he could not expect her to help him again tonight.
そのくせ点数悪いと怒るし、別に青崎が怒る筋合いじゃないと思う。
He complained under his breath as he cracked open his textbook. Apparently he intended to spend his time in this fashion until Alice finally awoke. Sound of the pages turning was the only audible noise in the grand hall. There was no ticking of clocks or rustling of leaves to disturb her sleep. After a few hours, Souyjuro quietly rose to his feet. The light that filled the foyer was beginning to turn from white to red.
そろそろバイトの時間か。
He glanced again at Alice as he stretched his stiff back. She slept in perfect stillness as she had this entire time. Souyjuro arched his brow in speculation. He had no idea what her normal sleeping schedule was, so he had no idea as to whether he should wake her.
いや、青崎も帰ってくるだろうし、いらぬ世話かな。
As if reaching the end of a long train of thought, Souyjuro gave a quick nod of his head and took his leave of the mansion. Today work was a shift at the Chinese restaurant in Misaki shopping district, the Mad Bear. The uniforms have been made by someone with an obvious preference for garish colors. The orange apron was emblazoned with a cartoonish polar bear slashing a walk in two with powerful claws. The design resembled warning signs about wild animals seen in the mountains and stood out in Misaki for its one-of-a-kind originality. This is the Chinese restaurant, the Mad Bear. Aside from its name and logo, the restaurant was the type of cheap, hole-in-the-wall dive that could be found anywhere. It faced competition from ever-increasing number of chain restaurants, though it had managed to last longer than the other dining spots, having received rave reviews on a regular basis. The Mad Bear prioritized personal touch, focusing its local clientele. What? Why wouldn't you just put it together? That's whatever. Focusing on its local clientele, and thus made a point to offer home delivery. It had earned the affectionate moniker QKS, the Quick Killer Shop. Making these deliveries was Sojuro's responsibility for the time being. Places in Misaki within cycling distance fell under his domain. Anything beyond that was handled by a more experienced staff member on the legendary 50cc King Salmon motorbike. But anyway. When delivery workers were not out on deliveries, they spent their shift bussing tables or washing dishes. The dinner rush was yet to come, and Souyjuro and his fellow delivery boys were shooting the breeze while washing dishes in the back.
聞いてるか、しずき。聞いてるよ、木の実。
The two were elbow deep in a giant sink as they enthusiastically scrubbed. At least that was what they pretended to do while they
和食の
gossiped.
ケニアだけじゃねえんだってよ。三崎町の大帝都にもメシアンにもその手の注文があったらしいぜ。そんなに肉が欲しいなら下市に行けばいいのにな。なんだって生肉だの大物の鮭丸ごとだのを出前させやがるのか。どうよ、こう露骨にヤバそうな話じゃね？ワニとかアザラシでも飼ってるんじゃねえかな、そいつ。
他に比べてみると確かに珍しい話だと思う。とこ
ワニはワニだろう。だ
他に比べてみると確かに珍しい話だと思う。ところで木の実、ワニってなんだ？
ワニはワニだろう。だっせ、実物見たことないのかよ。まあ俺もねえけどな。今度ガクガク動物ランドのアフリカ特集ビデオを貸してやるから見とけよ。
There's a familiar pattern of conversation between the two, especially now Konami was used to Sojuro's lack of general knowledge. The banner was interrupted by the delivery phone. The manager snapped up the receiver and quickly jotted down the order and the address. Once he hung up, everyone in the kitchen did their best to avoid making eye contact with him. Nobody wanted to go rushing out for delivery on such a cold day.
しずきくん、ちょっと遠いけど配達をお願い。
The manager singled Soujuro out for the task, seemingly unfazed by his staff's
はい、こ
laziness.
れ届けるもののリスト。
The manager tore the sheet with the order and address written on it from his memo pad. Soujuro took one look at it before a grimace quietly spread across his face.
マネージャー？
なんだい？
The manager stared right back at him as if he could tell what it was he wanted to
君の
say.
疑問はもっともだ。しかしな、長いことこの商売をやっていると、時にはこんなバカな話が転がってくることもある。そう、じゃあ冷蔵庫から品物持ってくるから。
Soujuro stared in admiration as the manager, dressed in black, marched out the kitchen in his all-business way. Nowhere was free from the odd occurrence now and then.
Osoi.
Wow, alright, I did not expect this. It was after 10 at night. Soujuro had taken a small detour on his way home from work and now faced an outraged Aoko as expected. Seeing her so visibly irritated made him feel a rush of relief. He did not know why she was angry, but he could tell it was a different type of anger than what he saw earlier in that morning.
そう言ってまだ10時になったばかりだろう。どうしたんだ青崎？
He set down the cardboard box he had been carrying in his arms and glanced toward the fireplace. The sleeping girl was there no more.
違うわ。もう10時になったの間違いでしょ。
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
ほんと、自分がどんな状態にあるか分かってないのね。いいから今に来て。
She walked briskly to the other room without pausing, leaving Soujuro standing in confusion, held tilted to one side. He proceeded to pick his box up, or back up, and follow after her eagerly. He removed his coat and hung it on a hanger as he entered the living room. Apparently today was one of those days where Alice kept herself locked away in her room. On a table were the familiar pills.
説明しなかった私も悪いけど、あなたも帰ってくる時間は守ってよね。こっちはそのつもりで作ってるんだから。
Aoko handed him the pills and a glass of water with an expectant look on her face.
薬なら出かける前に飲んだけど、体の調子だって悪くないし、そんなに慌てることか？
は？なんだって私たちがあんたの健康を気にかけなくちゃいけないのよ。
Poor Soujuro.
勘違いしてるようだけど、あんたが帰ってくるたびに飲んでるのって平たく言えば毒よ。即効性じゃないから効き目は半日すると出てくるんだけど、その前に新しい毒薬を飲んでおかないと古い毒が体に回ってばったりいくって寸法ね。 アリスのやつ、これぐらいしないと信用できないって言い張ったのよ。ほら、分かったらさっさと飲む。ま、私もこれ面倒だと思うし、近いうちもっと形のある方法を考えてみるから、それまでこの方法で我慢して。
言ってることは支離滅裂だが、とにかく今まで良くないものを飲んでたんだな。
Hojo took the pills from her and gulped it down. The fact that it was poison gave him no pause at all. And as for his roommate's tyrannical behavior, he showed no signs of standing up to it.
まったく、毒を持って毒を制するなんて、また古風な真似するな、青崎もアリスも。
Sojuro's face relaxed into a smile upon finding the funny side of the situation. Aoko was utterly dumbfounded as to how he could be happy at a time like this.
今日帰りが遅れたのは、アパートまで荷物を取りに行っていたからなんだ。そういうことなら電話の一つでもすればよかった。
荷物ってまさかそれじゃないでしょうね。
Soujuro nodded empathetically as she pointed incredulously at the cardboard box in his hands.
住んでいないのに家賃を払うのはバカらしいから、今日で引き上げてきた。一応いつでも戻れるように話はつけてあるから、3ヶ月ぐらいは大丈夫だよ。
家賃？あ、そっか、そうよね。私ってばなんでそんなことを忘れてたんだろう。アリスが聞いたら喜ぶわ、そりゃ。
A smile blossomed across his face, as they say. It was the open, bold-faced look of a child who just came up with a mischievous plan. Soujuro shook with fear at the thought of what that smile might bring his way.
けどずいぶん少ないのね、荷物。段ボール1箱分しかないの？
そうかな、十分多いだろう。それよりアリスは自室か？
ちょっと前に戻ったわ。珍しく食後もここに残ってたんだけど、待ちきれなかったみたいね。
She gave Soujuro a meaningful look while continuing to smile that sinister smile.
待ちきれなかったって何を？
そりゃあ、アリスが眠ってるのをいいことに、在庫のないフォションとブルーキャリコを勝手に使ってくれたどこかの誰かさんにお仕置きするためなんじゃない？
フォッションってあのお茶の葉？
そう、私もびっくりしたけどね。アリスがどっかで寝入るのはよくあることだけど、紅茶を用意して眠るなんてのは初めてだったから。どんな心境の変化か知りたくて起こしたら、アリスの方が驚いてたわ。一体誰の仕業なんだって。
Soujuro clapped his hands together as if remembering something important. He had forgotten to clean up the tea before leaving. The regret written from forehead to chin delighted Aoko immensely.
そうか。それじゃあアリスは怒っていただろう。
当然、コマドリがとばっちりでドリブルされてたしね。
ああ、俺でも怒る。片付けをきちんとしないなんて、だらしないにも程がある。
Soujuro harshly scolded himself for his failure.
論点違う。あのね、寝顔を間近で見られたから怒ってるのよ、アリスは。
え？そうかな。アリスはそういうのは気にしないと思うんだけど。
あんたはそうかもしれないけど、私たちは気にするの。
Ako's glare was enough to make glass shatter. There was an indescribable intensity in the way she said that.
それは青崎たち限定の話か？
世間一般での常識よ。自分が気にしないからって他人もそうだと思ってると、いつかやけどするからね。
でもそれだったらロビーで寝ているアリスにだって問題ないか？見かけたら放っておけないだろう、あんなの。
He has a point. You don't really just fall asleep randomly around the house and not worry about somebody. But then again, maybe Sojuro's just a nice guy.
その心意気は立派だけど、そこはそれ。この館の持ち主は彼女だから。この洋館内であなたが出会ったあらゆる不義不始末、失敗失態の責任は宗十郎に押し付けられるの。この意味、わかる
Ako's question sent Soujuro into a trance of deep thought until he finally uttered.
つまり ここはアリスの自治領なんだな。
はい、よくできました。正確には私とアリスのだけどね。領主は何をやっても許されるってことよ。
She smiled as she spoke and plopped herself down on the sofa. Souyjuro remained standing behind the sofa opposite her as he ran over their conversation again and again in his head. The notion of this being their kingdom made him realize he actually had no idea where the girls had come from or their family's background.
青崎、君ご両親はどうしてるんだ？
He inadvertently blurted out, this being the question foremost on his mind.
生きてるわよ。三崎町から下りに4駅行った東川ってところの地主。死は祖父だけど、今は隠居して両親と一緒の土地に住んでるわ。
そう聞くと、なんだか普通の家庭だな。
Souyjuro had imagined something more outrageous for a family of
両親は
magicians.
ね、父さんにはあんまり魔術回路は作られなかったみたいだから、その分私には2世代分の潜在能力があるって祖父は言ってるけど、どうだか。宗十郎の期待してるような一族はどっちかっていうとアリスの方よ。私と違って英国出身だからね、彼女。
Awkward offered nothing more, as if to suggest that was as far as she was willing to reveal for now. Souyjuro had insisted on talking to Alice directly rather than hearing things secondhand, so chose not to go back on... Huh? Oh, so he chose not to go back on his word by pushing the topic further.
ま、詳しくは本人から聞きなさい。アリスの紅茶好きもそこから来てるんだし。そういえば、なんで今日に限ってリーフティーなんか入れたの？ティーバッグを使った方がまだマシだったでしょうに。
青崎がそっちの方がいいって言ったじゃないか。アリスは紅茶にうるさいって。
Aoko was momentarily at a loss for words. He seemed so oblivious most of the time, but apparently he was attentive to some details, at least selectively.
ま、いいわ。それより明日の放課後だけど、また一人で帰ってくれない？年明けの行事があるんだけど、その場しのぎで行った餅つき大会が通っちゃってさ、明日も忙しいのよ、私。
Souyjuro nodded in acceptance. In fact, he had already been planning to do so before she even asked.
それはいいけど、体は大丈夫か、青崎。昨日から寝てないだろう。
夕方に3時間ちょい仮眠を取ってから調子はいいわ。そういうあんたこそ体は持つんでしょうね。もう少ししたら昨日の続き始めるわよ。
She meant the all-night cramming session, of course. Needless to say, Souyjuro was more than likely to struggle given that he, too, had not slept a wink. All he could do was give a relieved smile. He thought back to her days after he just transferred here, when she watched his every move from the sidelines and showed a startling amount of concern for him.
いいよ。どの道苦労するのは青崎の方だし、異例中の異例はありがたく受け取っておくとしよ
う。Oh, excuse me. His cheery response created on her
こと
just
だ
a
け
little.
はしつこく覚えてるんだから。
She heaved her shoulders in exasperation and dropped her head as an excuse to look away from the beaming smile on his face. Kind of a long chapter. Wait. There you go. Wow, chapter 7, that's kind of crazy. Check this out. Let's see. Alright, back to it like a crackhead. Following day, the last day of finals had ended without a hitch. That final December hurdle was finally a thing of the past. For all but one student, that is. In Souyjuro, the greatest challenge was yet to come. He bid farewell to his classmates, all jittery with excitement for the last day of the term, and headed into the Shiro Inuzuka woods. Shiro Inuzuka, yeah. Inuzuka. The road home was no different than yesterday. Like he was reliving yet another day striding up the hill. Yet today, there was a fierce determination in his steps. Today was his last chance, and he wanted nothing more than to talk to the girl. He did not care if she was cruel to him or ignored him, nor whether Aoko was being truthful when she said that she could trap him in a mirror land. Or something like that. All he really cared for was about having the chance to speak with her face to face. But nothing is ever that simple. To tell the truth, what he found upon finally entering the mansion was not wholly unexpected.
よく寝る子だな、本当。
Yo, lady, please sleep in your bed. The deja vu he was experiencing made him dizzy. He faced with an exact reenactment of the previous day. He could not help but blurt out what he was thinking. Alice was sleeping by the fireplace, just as she had done yesterday. The way her legs draped to one side resembled those of a princess in a children's book. She looked more comfortable than she had the day before. Miraculously, he had a rare flash of insight that enabled him to read the situation more clearly.
学校で飛び丸は一人何をしているんだろう。
The song is kind of crazy. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to find this song. There's only 3, right? 3 pages, yeah. Yep. That's what it was. It's her theme. Of course. Give me 1 second, please. Sometimes you gotta add songs to the playlist. You take the moon, and you take the moon, you take the moon, and you take the moon, you take the moon, and you take the moon, moon, moon. Oh, I got a subscriber. Nice. Let's go. Are we gaming now? Oh, thanks, big dog. Even though you left, thank you. Alrighty, let's keep it pushing. Kick, push, kick, push, kick, push, kick, push, and coast. By the way, we go, just a rebel. Looking for a place to go, so we kick, push, push, kick, push, and coast. Alrighty. Found the song, so I just want to do that real quick because that song was kind of fire.
学校で飛び丸は一人何をしているんだろう。
Upon glancing back at the entrance, he makes his decision, took a deep breath, and rolled up his sleeves. If today was a reenactment of yesterday, then he supposed he would play along with that idea. Souyjuro removed his shoes and headed for the kitchen. He was off to prepare another ill-fated pot of tea. She was angry about him using her precious futon, or how do you... Fashon? Croissant? How do you pronounce it? Fashion. It is French. Oh, Fachon. I thought it was Fachon. She was angry about him using her precious Fachon. This time he turned to Jackson's fruit and herb brew. Sadly, this was about as much as Souyjuro could manage to amend his behavior. He failed to realize that this was not the brand of tea that had landed him in hot water, but rather his incorrect brewing method. After filling the pot with tea, he carried it back to the foyer. His breath was visible in the cold air as he sat himself down by the fireplace. Souyjuro took a sip of the fruity tea he prepared for himself and pulled his textbook from his bag. Exams were over now, but he had been instructed to take extra classes for the subjects from day 1 of school. Quite inevitable. The foyer was warmer than outside, but still far from comfortable. It was enough to make anyone yearn for some source of warmth. Souyjuro dove into his electronics textbook in a winter chilled hall. The class was not very popular, which is why it had been recommended to him in the first place. The fact that everyone who took it started on equal footing made it more appealing to him than other classes.
青崎の言う通り
He downed the rest of the tea, having no appreciation for its flavor, and refilled the cup. The tea was still warm, since the ceramic teapot had excellent heat
文字で
retention.
物事を覚えるのは苦手みたいだ
He vaguely recalled their conversation as his eyes advanced across the page. The lack of lighting in the foyer was forcing him to rely on illumination from the skylight. The light cut into the room at a diagonal angle in such a way as to divide the foyer into light and dark areas, with the fireplace in shadow. The room resembled ancient ruins covered in ash, or perhaps the quiet, forgotten world of a faded fairy tale. Time slipped on by within the white walls of this room, hidden away from the sun. The minutes passed slowly for some time, until the sound of a textbook slamming shut brought the room back to reality. Souyjuro stretched his stiff back and eagerly got started on clearing up. He put his textbook back in his bag, placed his cup on the tray, leaving Alice sitting in front of her on the floor. He said unceremoniously. He spoke as if to convince himself that he had no other choice as he prepared to leave the sleepy foyer behind. But before he could, a sound behind him stopped him in his tracks. He turned around with his bag under his arm and tray in his hands. So as not to cause even a ripple in her teacup, he greeted her.
Yeah.
In a light, easygoing manner. She remained seated next to the fireplace like a black-eyed sleeping beauty. Her face was as still as a statue, almost no different than it had been in slumber. Looking at Alice now, he realized just how different she and Aoko really were. Aoko communicated her feelings openly, even if he never could quite tell where they came from. Her trademark expression of irritation would keep him guessing as to the reason she was angry, but to her credit, her emotional state was always clear. Alice, on the other hand, was completely unreadable. She might be angry, but then again sad. He could never tell in either way. Her question gave him a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. He could not decide whether it was animosity or perplexity that he heard in her voice. If the former, this was likely to turn into a replay of their interaction from the other night. An image of the shattered bottle sprang to his mind. Souyjuro knew his response would be extremely important. After struggling for a few moments, he finally worked up the courage to say something. Just not the correct thing, unfortunately. Poor Souyjuro.
そうだな一口じゃ説明できないから座るよ
He had no idea what the correct approach would be, so he simply did whatever came into his mind instead. She gave him no response. Oh my gosh, she's so scary. Her face said that she detested his presence, but he plowed ahead regardless. Souyjuro took a seat and sat down the tray once more. Their eyes met. Her inscrutable gaze was enough to turn most people away. But the target for animosity appeared not to notice it at all. This dude is such a goofball. This dude is such a goofball. I can't, man. Oh my gosh.
それで
Yes. Get it?
ああ、遅くなったけど、こうして話がしたかったんだ、アリスと。
Despite having suggested that it would take time to explain, he managed to sum things up succinctly.
私と
そうだね。青崎とはもっと話したいところだけど、それよりは3人で話してみたい。
Alice found herself out of kilter, unable to read his true intentions. Souyjuro continued on, failing to notice her bewilderment.
青崎は普段からアリスとは会話がないって言うんだよ。それが俺のせいなら困るし、俺のせいじゃないならもっと困る。せっかく同じ場所にいるのに会話がないなんて、もったいないと思うんだ。
Each word he spoke was heavy with emotion. Alice remained utterly unable to discern this boy's intentions. All she could parse was that there was something he wanted from her. But what could that be? What she found even stranger was that he was not speaking to her from a place of fear.
あなたは私が怖くないの？
ああ、だってそう言えるほど俺は君をよく知らない。
Her gleaming eyes looked like they were made of polished quartz. His response had not been what she expected. He spoke with pure honesty and unfettered truth. Such boldness, however, did not actually upset her. The conversation ground to a halt. If you could even call it a conversation in the first place. Alice grew tense, as if displeased by the strange, comfortable moment of silence between them. Souyjuro endured her cold stare, showing no sign of flinching. Okay.
私と話をしたいと言ったでしょ。なら好きにしてみたら。
Oh, that's sweet. It was more of a challenge than an invitation. He had neither a topic on hand, nor were they intimate enough to strike up a casual conversation. Nonetheless, her challenge hanged in the air, waiting for a response.
じゃあ、あの鳥の話を。ほら、そこにいる青い鳥。たまに見かけるんだけど、君の飼い鳥か？それとも、ほら、なんて言ったかな。プロイだっけ？あの鳥もアリスの使い魔？
Her eyes let slip for a moment a very natural response. It was a noise, such as that which one might feel toward a troublemaker.
あれもプロイだけど、私とは何の関係もないダチョウ。
Alice, you gotta stop talking like
あ
that.
れもプロイだけど、私とは何の関係もないダチョウ。ずいぶん古くからいるだけで、私もよく知らないわ。
じゃあ勝手に住んでるのか、この家に。
勝手になんて私が許すはずがないでしょ。ロビンは本当に役に立たないけど、あんなのでも母から譲り受けたものだから。
そっか。
Alice, please stop
ロ
talking
ビンは
so
本当に役に
segmented.
立たないけど、あんなのでも母から譲り受けたものだから。失敗続きでも特別に住まわせてあげてるの。
There you go, already.
そっか。安心した。
You're so sure.
ここに住むの
You
役に立たなきゃ
can't
ダメっ
say
て
that,
わけで
man.
もないん
That's
だ
so
ね。
mean. You turned away in silence to avoid looking at his hapless grin. Thus began Sojuro's very lengthy monologue. Started with his part-time job, then moved on to the school. Next came the amusement park and random gossip around town. And the last subject of rent. He spent all 20 minutes on mindless small talk. Then he ran out of things to say and finally stopped.
ごめん。アルバイトがあるから。もう行くよ。
And that was that. After finally getting his long-awaited chance to talk to her, he realized he had no exit plan in place. So he returned the tray to the kitchen, placed his bag in the foyer, and headed for the door. She had never seen the boy so candid, which is why, overcome with surprise, she found herself calling out, "Oh, shoot." Alice, don't kill him, please. Wait. She had no reason to do so, and she called out anyway.
何？
その今日はポットがあったけど。
あ、うん。昨日の反省点だったから、結局使ったのは自分だけだけど。
そう。そのポットはコーヒーとの兼用だから、ハーブティーには合わないわ。
Sojuro's eyes grew wide with shock. Now he remembered that there had been all sorts of cups and teapots in the cupboard, each one specially designed for a different type of tea.
なかなかに奥深い。あれかな。慣れないことはするもんじゃないってことか。
She let out a vexed sigh.
どうして私を起こさなかったの？
Either she had not heard what he said, or she had been waiting this whole time for a chance to ask him that. I'm not on auto, am I? I am. There you go. Oh. Okay. Wondering why it was on auto. In any case, her question abruptly interrupted his stream of thought. He felt silent with introspection. The thought of waking her had not so much crossed his mind, either that day or the previous one.
言って。起こす気も起きることも期待していなかったのは。
Her eyes were filled with animosity. Lies were useless against such an all-piercing gaze. The setting sun transformed the foyer into a battle of life and death. Lies or deceptive answers would not be permitted. Amidst the palpable tension that filled the room, where any move, wrong or otherwise, was likely to get him killed, he felt pain rather than fear. Alice's voice was icy cold, and preemptively rejecting any response he was to give. The boy vaguely imagined a newborn chick that had fallen from the nest, struggling to survive on its own. It gasped, hanging on to a thread of hope, yet detesting where that thread hung.
言わなきゃいけないか。
Alice nodded
じゃあ
sharply.
言うけど、別に深い考えがあったわけじゃない。単に寝た子を起こすのは良くないだろう。
冗談は聞いてないわ。
冗談じゃないよ。眠っているのならそのままでいいと思ったんだ。話はしたいけど、それはまた目が覚めた次の機会にするべきだって。
随分と悠長なのね。青子があなたを守るのは今日までだって聞いているけど、私に取り入る機会はこれが最後なのに。それともあれだけ忠告されておいてまだ何も分かっていないの？
He had not. He swore to her, agreed to her terms, and gone as far as to sit face to face with her to get to know her. Surely, he thought, this is enough to escape death. She believed, as a mage, that his naive goodwill and simple-mindedness were all the reasons she needed to execute him. Trivial misunderstandings will only make things worse at this point.
そりゃ何もわからないよ。魔術とか魔法とか、たった数日でわかるもんか。はっきりしているのは、アリスも青崎も言ったことはきっちり守るってことだけだ。
ならどうして？
Her gaze said what she really wanted to ask. She wanted to know why he did not beg for his life. She knew the answer. She saw the look on his face when he turned to leave without so much as trying to wake her. A look of resignation. What on earth had it meant?
どうしてって、そう言われても困る。そうだな。機会が訪れなかったのなら、それはそういうことだと思ったのかもしれない。君の寝顔はそれぐらい なんていうか判断に困った。青崎とは違う意味で簡単には関われないと思ったんだ。
Sojo struggled to find the right words, but said what he was feeling in the moment anyway. He had seen a sleeping witch of the wood who clearly needed someone's help, yet sought the help of no one.
そう。でもしずきくんは関わろうとしているのね。その機会は訪れなかったのに。
機会はやってきたよ。なんでこっちも今日ぐらいは自分の勝手にして無茶をしたくなったんだ。
しずきくんの言う通りなら私はあなたを拒絶するしかないのに。
まあそこが難しいところなんだけど。
Sojo glanced at the entrance. He had no reason to. He just felt an urge to do
多
so.
分そこを解決したがってるのは俺だけじゃないと思うよ。
He muttered as if speaking to himself. It was clearly meant for her to hear. Alice knew full well how poorly he understood the situation. All this was one giant misunderstanding on his part. His tiny gesture of goodwill, pitiful and pure, resembled that of someone reaching out to help a dying kitten. For Alice, doing so would be akin to clutching the thorns of a rose. She felt pain in her chest for the first time in quite a while.
けど私はあなたの同居を認めてはいないわ。
She addressed the floor at her feet to avoid showing him how she truly felt. If she had, he would have seen that her face looked just the way Aoko's had earlier.
だろうな。それはきっと今は解決できない問題だ。でもそのうち何かの気まぐれであっさり終わるものかもしれない。だからその時までアリスはずっと俺を嫌っていていいんだと思う。
Her gasp of breath was like a response in itself, to suggest she could keep hating him. She had once wished to hear those words so dearly, if only once.
大体だぞ。アリスだけじゃなく青崎も同居を認めてない節があると思う。だから認めてもらうなんて意気込み自体が間違いなんだ。どうあっても俺は青崎や君たちとは違うんだし。となるとあとは我慢してもらうしかない。難しい話だけど一緒にいても邪魔にならないぐらいならその可能性は上がらないか。
Thinking that of course it was possible, but if it were that easy, none of this would have been necessary in the first place. Alice nodded in agreement. There was no way he could have planned for things to work out this well, but his plan in fact had worked, if inadvertently, from the moment the conversation
例
began.
えばあなたが隣にいても眠っていられるぐらいに。
そうだね。例えばの話。
Alice did not stop him this time. Oh wow, I forgot. I didn't even read the second sentence. Beaming, Sojo stood up and left the foyer. Alice did not stop him this time. He had a newfound spring in his step as he headed to work. I got so enraptured with the story, I forgot to read. Man. But something gave him a moment's
実
pause.
際覗き見は趣味が悪いと思う。
I knew she was gonna show up. I knew it. He complained aloud to make sure a certain someone heard him. No more than 2 minutes had passed since Soujiro left the mansion when a long-haired figure came creeping into the foyer. Aoko Ozaki had been just outside the entire time. Eavesdropping.
帰ってたの。
Aww, look at her. She's so cute looking. She looks like an old lady. Oh man, she's so sweet. With a sullen glare, Alice addressed the interloper. Aoko was shivering from head to toe after standing in the cold for so long. She deemed gloves an abomination and refused to wear them except in the most extreme cold. As a result, her slender fingers were pitifully swollen and
ち
red.
ょっと前にね。それでどうだったのアリス。随分と話してたみたいだけど。
She looked strangely elated, as she blew on her hands to warm them. Alice was not fooled at all by Aoko's facade, clearly from the ill-tempered look she wore on her
あな
face.
たがここまで過保護とは思わなかったわ。意地？それとも義務？どっちかっていうと成り行きね。で、どうだったのよ結果は。気に食わなかったら実力行使に出るって言ってたじゃない。
Alice's mood was growing darker and darker the longer she had to look at Aoko's cheerful posturing. It went all back to their dinner together the previous night. After everything that had happened in the foyer, Alice was both more suspicious of and intrigued by Souyjuro than ever before. She insisted that Aoko let him walk home alone the next day. No wonder. She then used her concoction to fake her slumber and recreate the same. Wow. That portion of her plan went well, but the rest had veered totally off course. It did not help to know her roommate had savored every moment of it from the other side of the wall either. To make matters worse, Alice was frustrated at herself for letting such trivial matters bother her. She stared at the teacups still sitting on the floor. Her pale finger pressed his cold rim.
青子の言う通り、害にはならない人ね。あくまで今のところの話だけど。
She forced a tone of indifference in order to hide her irritation with her apprentice. It was in this moment that Sojuro's fate was decided.
あら、それだけ？アリスにしては長く話してたのに。
Relentless, Aoko continued her line of questioning. Alice only stared back icily.
青子、あなた、隠していたわね。
She voiced her displeasure at Aoko's behavior in no uncertain terms. Suddenly, the air in the foyer felt cold as ice. They stared at one another, each trying to guess the other's next move.
さすがね。よくそこに気がついたもんだわ。でも、こればかりは譲れないのよ。
Aoko widened her stance and glared at Alice.
何も全て奪うとは言っていないわ。そうね。あなたにも3割ぐらいは回すつもり。
Completely unperturbed by Aoko's warlike posturing, a simple look was all Alice needed to keep her roommate in check.
10が3に化けちゃちょっと黙ってらんないわね。高望みは命取りよ、青子。
What are you talking about? Alice remained calm and dignified, not moving a muscle. It felt like hours passed as the two stared at each other in silence. Aoko was grinding her teeth in frustration. At this rate, their alliance would be in tatters before they even confronted their foe. And worst of all, she knew Alice had the upper hand. Aoko accepted her defeat with a tch.
悔しいけど、アリスが6、私が4で手を打つわ。
It pained her to settle for less. Alice nodded in satisfaction.
家主は私だけど、彼を招いたのは青子だから。その代わり、
They're talking about the rent. Oh, they're gonna run his pockets so bad. Poor Souyjuro. Oh man, God save this man.
いいけど。ああ、情けない。こんなことなら錬金術でもかじっておくんだった。そうでもないわ。彼らバブルが弾けて大変だって話よ。
Alice spoke with the confidence of someone with first-hand experience of such matters. Yeah, Aoko only nodded absent-mindedly in response. Their bitter fight was over how to split the take of Sojuro's rent now that he was officially going to move in. Not the most becoming quarrel for a pair of mages. Forcing a boy to live with them and then demanding he pay rent was beyond extortion. It was truly vicious.
でも、そんなセリフが出るってことは、アリスもようやく認めたってことね。
Aoko was triumphantly satisfied with herself.
認めてはいないけど、公園での夜、彼を結界で捕捉しなかった責任があるから、彼と約束をした青子だけを責められないでしょ。約束？
Aoko looked up at the ceiling as she recalled the night at the amusement park. Only a week at most had passed since then, but Aoko already felt that Sojuro's fate in her own hand, had become intrinsically linked. Or perhaps they had always been connected by by fate since the moment they'd met. She cannot see into the future, so there was no way to know for sure.
ま、縁とか運とかはともかく変だけどいいやつよね、あいつ。
A thought uttered to herself in self-confirmation more than to Alice. Alice Coin looking annoys, perhaps in an attempt to voice her displeasure at her comment.
アオコ、あの傷を知ってる？傷？
Alice raised her slender fingers to her mouth as she pushed the words back in. She had blurted it out in the heat of the moment, a secret that no one else is supposed to know, but that which one she couldn't keep to herself. Aoko tilted her head in confusion. Alice looked relieved for some reason. Her sudden antipathy towards Aoko had dissipated as well.
幸せな人。
Said Alice as she took a sip of her cold tea. She made no attempt to explain who was fortunate or why. A moment later, her beautiful face contorted in revulsion.
まずい。
No wonder he didn't care for the taste. She abandoned the cup to the floor once more. Her black dress unceremoniously scrunched up as she stood. Just one sip of the underbrewed tea sent her fleeing to the drawing room to remove the bad taste from her mouth. As soon as she was gone, Aoko hesitatingly took the teacup in her own hands. It was almost certainly better left untasted, but she could not help but wonder how Sojuro's tea could arouse such a strong response. After one small step, she returned quietly to the floor.
だからティーバッグにしろって言ったのに、あのバカ。
Oh, that's so cute. The expression on her face was nearly identical to that of her roommates. Oh, man, that's so cute. Oh, it's over. Oh, wow. That was a long chapter. That was a really long chapter. Let's see. Let's go to the archives because now there's a new book there apparently. What's this? Yeah, what is this? Is this what happened with Souyjuro? Or did I already read this? You know what? Sure, let's see. Walking around the mansion at night often led to mysterious encounters. Miss Night suddenly filled the hallway. Doors might appear and disappear. Just when Souyjuro thought he had seen it all with the pig-shaped shadows bending the carpet, he heard the sound of a bird's flapping coming from the sunroom.
何事?
As much as he had become accustomed to turning a blind eye to such occurrences, the sound of flapping wings in the sunroom was too much to ignore. And not just one bird, or even two. It sounded like dozens. So many birds packed in the sunroom would inevitably lead to shattered windows and broken glass. Souyjuro grabbed the broom and dashed toward the sound, prepared for the worst. Perhaps he was moved by his natural impulse to help, or desperate self-defense. His mind flashed to what a teacher had said at school.
皆さんも部屋の整頓は心がけてくださいね。人間の自制心って環境に流されるらしいですから。ほら、それまで犯罪の少ない町だったのに、一つボロボロの家ができただけで近隣住人がみんな自堕落になるというあれ。環境への無関心さがすさんだ精神を作り上げるとか眉唾ですけど、正直なところブームだからって盗んだバイクで走り回ったり、学校の廊下の窓ガラスとか割って回っちゃダメですよ。
That's sweet. That's really sweet. At the time, school gangs had garnered a certain reputation among the youth.
窓が割れると心が折れる。
Souyjuro appreciated the basic message of the lecture as he ruminated over it. The thought of broken windows had given him a sense of urgency, as that the mansion's very moral foundations were at stake. His roommates were harsh enough with him already. Anything further would only lead to rampant rumors at school about their cruelty. Oh man, that's crazy. 1 second, please. Oh wow, yeah, no, it still doesn't update. That's funny. See ya. Alrighty. He had to protect the honor of the student council president. He was also concerned for his own safety that sent him rushing to the sunroom. However, there wasn't a bird to be seen, or a chirp to be heard upon his arrival.
あら
Oh? Well then, alright. Only Alice and Aoko, sipping afternoon tea at the table that overlooked the courtyard, were present. The thousands of birds Souyjuro had sensed with his mountain intuition were nowhere to be seen.
今ここに鳥が来なかった？
アリス見た？
さあ、もう見えないのならいないということでしょう。
だ
It's
っ
a
て
typo.
いないよ鳥。
I hope they're not gaslighting him, good lord. It was a lie, so blatant even Souyjuro could see through it.
そんなバカな。
He knew for a fact he heard the flapping of a flock of birds. Unable to accept that there really were no wild animals in the room, Souyjuro approached the windows with suspicion. There were no feathers or any other signs of birds having been outside either.
あ、夕食鳥鍋？
Of course, Aoko would say something like that as she watched Souyjuro search desperately.
あいにく今日のバイトは魚屋さんだ。イワシでよければ土産にするけど。
イワシか？私あのパイ嫌いなのよね。いえ、むしろイワシのパイとか食べたことないのよね。
Aoko's standard routine was far ahead of its time. Souyjuro backed away from the window and begrudgingly left the sunroom. Feeling Alice's all too familiar, inscrutable gaze upon his back,
なんだいアリ。
just as he opened his mouth to ask her what she wanted,
あいった。
a blue comet crashed into his head. It needed no explanation. It could only be Robin, the mysterious bird that appeared frequently in the mansion. It shrilled accusingly. The truth was, the tiny aggressor that assaulted him just now was the greatest of the mansion's 7 wonders. And I really want to play Steins Gate. Oh my gosh. That's so funny. Souyjuro encountered all sorts of people along his route to work. Still new to the city life, he found the crowds of people outside the station utterly fascinating. In fact, they were the highlight of his commute. No two people wore exactly the same clothes or walked in the same fashion. With so many people, you would think they would all melt into an indistinguishable huddle. But each person he saw was different and unique. Souyjuro was excited as a child as he looked out at the bustling, diverse streets of the city.
いや、
Closing his eyes in shame, he sighed. He was upset with himself for behaving like a bumbling tourist from the countryside.
ちょっと青信号で突っ立ってられるの邪魔なんだけど、何柄にもなく黄昏れてるんだか。
Why is Kamari so mean? Hold on.
ちょっと青信号で突っ立ってられるの邪魔なんだけど、何柄にもなく黄昏れてるんだか。
A stern and familiar voice from behind him snapped him out of his navel. What? Navel gazing?
なんだ、マッドベアに行く途中だったんだ。
I really like this shot. I don't know why. Even though it's just 2 JPEGs looking at each other. Something about it just seems really cute.
私はコンビニのバイト。こっちは5時からだけど。しずきは？
Why are these two? Why are they heavy workers? I know Souyjuro. At least he had the Cavaliers versus the Nuggets. Hold on. Nah, bro, I'm gonna have to watch this video when I'm done with this stream. This is so funny. Big yoke, the big fella. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what you all been waiting for.
同じく5時から。くまりはどこか寄るところでも？
本屋に寄った帰り、読みたかった本がなくなってたから仕方なく出歩いてたところよ。
なるほど。時間を持て余しているところの話だね。
The girl who greeted him was Kojika Kumari. There you go, you finally get her name. Kojika Kumari. Remember her. Remember her. For every Tobimaru, there's a Kumari. Though it would have been more accurate to say she was looking for a pretext to fight him rather than... Why? Why? To Souyjuro, Kumari had been the first person in the city he could look up to. They met at his first job, where she insisted he wasn't cut out to work the register after many mistakes, and convinced him to quit working at convenience stores altogether. In the end, she introduced him to his current job at the Chinese restaurant, the Mad Bear, a much better fit for Souyjuro.
何その無理やりな顔。なんか元気ない。いつも以上にイラッとくるわ。しずきのいいところなんていつもピシッとしてる背筋ぐらいなのにみっともなく丸まってるし。もしかして悩みとかあるの？マットベアにタチの悪い先輩でもいるとか。
That's so
それな
sweet.
ら話ぐらいは聞いてあげる。言ってみたら。
She's so mean to him, but that's so sweet. Oh man. Though her tone was stern, her eyes were earnest. Having grown up in the city herself, she was irritated by virtually everything Souyjuro said and did. Nevertheless, she still treated him like an equal. Introducing him to his current job was just one example of her sincerity.
いや、別に悩みとかそういうんじゃなくて、不思議なことがあったというか、珍しいものを見たというか。
Souyjuro could not find the words to explain the situation, but that did not stop him from trying. There was no problems at the Mad Bear to speak of. He liked it just as much as his other job at Otatsu. That's so hard to pronounce. Oh my goodness, hold on. Uotatsu. Because like, I imagine the T, the second T is silent. I'm just gonna go with my gut and say Uotatsu. The fishmongers in the shopping district. In fact, his problem had nothing to do with work at all. No, his problem was with a certain bird that would not stop pecking at him recently.
鳥につっつかれる？何それ？小さい悩み。でもまあ、青い鳥っていうのは確かに珍しいよね。
いや、珍しいのは外見の話じゃなくて。
He stopped, unsure of how to proceed. Words alone were not enough to convey the bird's plump body or the sound of its chirping.
綺麗な青色といったらマウンテンブルーバードだけど、日本にはいないわよね。青いツバメだったらいるかもしれないけど。
I think it is actually.
ツバメじゃなくて丸っこいんだ。図鑑で調べたんだけど。
Oh, Robin, I'm so dumb, I forgot, it's literally Robin. The other thing is a swallow.
コマドリは存在しない。しずきは縁日の青ひよこって知ってる？知らないわよね。いい、そう面白い話じゃないから忘れて。それより、そのコマドリって1話だけなの？
ああ、1話だけだ。つがいは見当たらない。
突然変異だとしたらちょっとかわいそうね。生まれた時から最後の1話だなんて孤独には程があるわ。どんな鳥かは知らないけど、次に見かけたら優しくしてあげたら。 自販機で10円を拾うぐらいの幸運は運んでくれるかもよ。
Her words were perfectly kind, but he could hardly sympathize with the creature after all the painful pecking to which it had subjected him. He wouldn't have called the bird lonely either.
いいじゃない、小鳥1羽ぐらい。そりゃ都会で鳥につつかれるのは珍しいけど、いい方の珍事よそれ。これがゴミ袋を漁るカラスの大群だったら困りものでしょうけど。
あ、そういえば他にも気になることが。
Her example had reminded him of the mystery of the disappearing birds at the mansion. A stranger than strange event.
実は今あそこに見える丘に住んでるんだけど、出るんだ、大量のムクドリが頻繁に。そのくせ街に出ると見かけない。
当たり前でしょう。街じゃ鳥なんて見かけないし、あそこは山だから動物は多いんじゃない？それよりあなた、あの山に引っ越したの？前のアパートは引き払ったって聞いてたけど、学校まで通うの大変じゃない。なんだってあんな偏僻なところに。
ちょっとした成り行きだよ。それに通うのは大変じゃない。大変なのは中の話なんだ。
Sorry, I forgot. Wow. It took 30 minutes to reach town on foot. The 40 minutes to the nearest convenience store would be the real kicker for most people. For Souyjuro, it was no inconvenience. The real problem was the dark forces beyond human understanding that lurked within the grounds.
すまない。それはクマリに話すことじゃなかった。それより今の話だ。街には鳥が少ないと言ったけど、どうして？
単に環境に適応できなかったのよ。何？鳥の話には随分と食いつくわね。しずき、動物好き？
どちらかというと好きな方だけど。
そう、私は嫌い。そんな私に鳥の話とかしてほしい。
Her statement could hardly be more self-contradictory. Minutes after telling him to be nice to a bird that attacked him, she was now claiming she did not even like
そう
animals.
だな。嫌いなだけで苦手でないのなら、知ってる範囲で聞かせてほしい。
痛いとこつくじゃない。いいわ、バイトまでの時間つぶしにしてあげる。さっきの続き、環境に適応できるかできないかってところからね。今でこそこんなだけど、岬はここまで大きな町じゃなかったんだって。昔はその半分が森だったから、彼らはもともと森に適した生活をしていたのよ。
The way Kumari addressed him was of note. Whether she liked him or not, she seemed to at least have some respect for him.
でも近代化した町じゃ自然のサイクルも成り立たない。人間ってのはまず環境を自分たちの都合に変えるから。やぶかが多いってことで小さな川の流れを変えたり、町中コンクリートで塗り固めちゃえば鳥的にはお手上げよ。虫も森も少ないんじゃ、もう山に逃げるしかない。彼らは故郷を追われてこの森から山に移った。人間にとって都合のいい町は鳥たちが生きるコロニーにはなり得ないから。
そんなことぐらいで減るものか。その姿を見なくなるぐらいに。
そこまで極端じゃないとは思う。現にあなただってムクドリを見てるでしょ。比較の問題よ。街には人間が多いから鳥の姿は余計希少に感じるだけ。たまに見かけるだけで珍しいと思えるぐらいにね。
ああ、確かに。じゃあ鳥は町からいなくなっただけであの山に移り住んで。
Oh my goodness. Wow, I'm bugging out, dog. Oh my gosh, I'm legit I'm playing this like I'm by myself. Alright, humans might not be able to see them in day-to-day life, but they were alive and well nonetheless. Their habitat and lifestyle changed with the times, but they never truly disappeared. So your sense of life, of relief, was sharply disrupted by a serious hit from Kamari.
あの山に天敵がいなければね。 人間の手による乱獲か、移った先にいる生態系との衝突か、どちらにせよ居場所を失った彼らの寿命は短いと思う。旅行鳩の例もあるし、気がついた時には取り返しつかないのが動物と人間の関係よ。
旅行鳩？
そう、旅行鳩。体長は40センチほどもある大型の綺麗な鳥。オスの翼は深い青色で、胸は鮮やかなエンジ色。オレンジ色の目は嘘みたいに愛らしくて、その羽は時速100キロで長い距離を旅するの。
Her voice had a certain tenderness to it. She was daydreaming about birds she had never even seen in the flesh.
北アメリカにいた鳩でね、春は南から北へ、冬は冬越えのために北から南に移動するの。今から100年以上も前の話よ。彼らはかつて地上で最も繁殖した高等動物だった。何しろその数は50億。当時の総人口より多かったっていうんだから、圧巻よね。
なんと人間より数の多い動物がいたっていうのか？
うん。でも彼らは絶滅したわ。他ならぬ人間の手によって。16世紀にヨーロッパからアメリカ大陸にやってきた探検家たちは、空を覆い尽くすほどの鳥の群れを見た。それが旅行鳩を記した一番古くて確かな記録。まあ私も本で知った知識だけど、太陽を隠してそのおびただしい数で森を覆って雪のように糞を落としていく光景なんて、今じゃもう夢物語でしょうね。でも当時の人にとっては悪夢だった。旅行鳩一羽一羽は美しいフォルムをしていても、それだけの数が集まればそれはもう暴力なんだから。彼らはその時点では森を破壊し、人間を脅かす悪魔のような存在だった。営巣地は 10km にまで及んで、1コロニーにつき5万羽近い鳥の鳴き声が響いたのよ。一瞬にして風景を変えるほどの鳥の群れと、世界を覆うほどの鳴き声。冒険家たちが救んだのもうなずけるわね。
一つの住処に5万羽。
Souyjuro showed off as he attempted to count the number with his digits. He could barely count the number of people in the crowd outside the station. This was far beyond his capacity.
でもそんな数の鳥を人間の手でどうやって？
ええ、当時誰もがそう思ったんでしょうね。でも話は簡単だったの。人間にとって旅行鳩は脅威でもあったけど、渡り鳥の胸肉は美味しいでしょ。よく鍛えられてるから。そんな食材が空に向かって鉄砲を撃つだけでバタバタと落ちてきたとしたら、あなたはどうする？まあ身も蓋もないことを言えば、旅行鳩って鳥は簡単にお金にできる生き物だった。かくして狩りは延々と続けられた。落ちた鳥は羽をむしられて塩漬けの樽に押し込まれて次々と出荷された。それはもう狩りですらなかった。ただの消費。人間側は労働の実感も作業の手間すら感じなくなっていた。その頃旅行鳩は1羽1セントで手に入れることができたんだって。ほんと、その国最小の通貨1枚で売買される命が、ほんと信じられる？その国最小の通貨1枚で売買される命がこの地球にはあったなんて。
Kamari spoke as if reciting from a textbook. Her voice nevertheless had a certain darkness to it. Was it pity for the slain birds, or disgust for her fellow man? Either way, the passenger pigeon's fate was a cruel joke carried out by humanity. Typical, some might say. Poor Souyjuro had yet to comprehend just how typical that side of humanity was.
けどそれはまだまだ序の口で、本番は19世紀に入ってからだった。人間の旅行鳩狩りはますます熱狂していった。学校で習ったでしょ？ ゴールドラッシュ。南北戦争を経てアメリカ合衆国は急激に成長していく。西欧からの移民は増え続け、1870年には4000万もの人口に達していたわ。そんな移民たちの胃袋と財布を満たす材料として旅行鳩は最高の獲物だった。でもっと最悪なことに、人間は工夫する生き物だった。彼らはより早く、より多く、より簡単に旅行鳩を乱獲する手段を競い合った。目をつぶした鳩をおとりにして集団を誘い込んで、1日で1万羽以上捕らえたやつさえいた。それでも彼らは乱獲に疑問すら持たなかった。
Hold on. Sorry for the pace breaker. Oh, actually, give me 1 second.
Anda, pero yo te hice uno de jengibre.
Pero eso no hace nada, dárselo, está bien, échalo.
No, eso no se sabe si se puede ligar con cosas. ¿Qué te duele?
La
Tú
garganta.
lo preparas en agua caliente. ¿Te duele la garganta?
Bébete ese primero. Si lo fuiste en cuenta tarde, tú haces eso.
This is so hot. Alright, so I saved. Yeah, I saved. Alright, so I wanted to find the song that not the archive, no, not the archive, yeah, just go to the, yeah, go out to archives, exit that, and then go to the title. No, do not leave the game. Sound mode. It's funny. My mom, she made me some tea. And it's just fitting to what's it called? After all the tea talk we had in chapter 7, I think. This one though. Sorry for taking so long, I just want to find this. Oh man. Honey's so strong. I hate the pill. I do know. I do remember this one from the amusement park. Or I think well, both of them, since I think it played multiple times, but still. this one. Excuse me. Oh man, the tea's really sour for some reason. Is this it? I do remember this song, but I don't remember if it was this one. No, it's not this one. Oh, I got it. Get a message for Discord from. Oh, that's what it was. Okay. Sorry for taking so long. I just didn't think it would take this long. Let me check this one before I go back because let me see. Let me see if I can hear the song for a bit.
で、もっと最悪なことに、人間は工夫する生き物だった。
Okay. Yep, not this one. Yeah, I think it was this one. Most of these are in Japanese, man. Why are most of these in Japanese? I'm gonna have to look this up on Spotify then. So. If I go on YouTube though. It's this one, yeah. Alright, I finally found it. I finally found it. It took a while, but we're here. Alrighty, I'm sorry, Kumari. It took a while, but I just had to. I had to. Good OSTs will not go to
もっ
waste.
と最悪なことに、彼らはより早く、より多く、より簡単に旅行鳩を乱獲する手段を競い合った。目をつぶした鳩を鳥にして集団を繁殖と狩猟のバランスは誰が見ても明らかに狂っていたのに。
She was doing everything she could to speak in calm, measured tones. Souyjuro, meanwhile, was completely enraptured by her words. Having been raised in the mountains, it was by no means a happy story for him. But right now, he was more interested in knowing why it ever happened in the first place.
一方的すぎないか？旅行鳩だって数が減ってくれば人間には近寄らないんじゃ。
そこが彼らの不幸だったのよ。旅行鳩は繁殖力が非常に弱くて自衛手段を持たない鳥だった。大群で暮らすこと、それだけが彼らの身を守る手段だったの。彼らが50億の王国を築けたのはそれまで天敵がいなかったからなんでしょうね。先住民であるインディアンも彼らを乱獲することはなかったというし、けど入植者たちは自然のサイクルには点で疎かった。何よりあのおびただしい数の鳥が絶滅するなんて 夢にも思わなかった。
I mean, genuinely, 5 billion birds. Just if you replace that with lives, like human lives, it sounds even crazier. Cause like, you know, it's they're birds. They're not. Well, they're sentient, but they're not like conscious in terms of like, oh, they can speak, they can articulate. Of course, you know, again, they're sentient beings, but it's like it kind of puts it in perspective for me, where it's like, dang, like 5 billion lives just in general. Take away the fact that they're birds and don't even replace it with anything. Just 5 billion lives in general gone because they were hunted for sport and money. Like that's really bleak.
旅行鳩にしたら晴天の霹靂よ。まさか何世紀も遅れて海の向こうから天敵がやってくるなんて。
Yeah, literally, who could have predicted any of that?
そうして1896年、人間はようやく熱狂を冷ますほどの現実に直面したわ。たったの25万羽。
250,000?
それが確認された旅行鳩の総数。何もかも手遅れよ。急いで保護法が作られたけど、人間の習慣はそう簡単には変わらないわ。
I'm sorry, like, you know, of course I went on that little break to find the song, but like, this conversation's been really dark, like, really sad, but you know, it's realistic. It's history. It happened, and there's nothing we can do about it. But it's like, it just goes to show what the narrator was talking about. How like Souyjuro wouldn't know, but Kamari is really aware. Humanity sucks sometimes. If anything, humanity sucks a lot of the time. For a lot of good that they have done, this is just one of the few short examples of the bad that has come from it, from progression.
あるいは狩人たちはこう思ったのかもしれない。まだ25万羽もいるじゃないか。1000羽や2000羽ぐらいなら独り占めしても構わないだろう。そうしてハンターたちは当時最新の技術、電報で旅行鳩たちの所在を知らせ合って、実に20万羽の旅行鳩を仕留め、4万羽を傷つけた。生き延びたのは5000羽だけ。この時点で彼らは野生で生きられる種ではなくなったのよ。
Sojuro's face sunk into a scowl. No longer able to survive in the wild. He knew all too well what that phrase meant. No wild animal can last long on its own. No animal can survive without a sufficiently large population of their fellow kind and sufficient feeding grounds to support the group. Strength in their massive numbers was all the passenger pigeons ever had. And so once that was gone, they were as good as extinct.
それで旅行鳩はどうなったんだ？
最後に保護された旅行鳩はたったの3羽。シンシナティの動物園ではオス2羽、メス1羽の旅行鳩が飼育されたけど、1年でオスたちは死んじゃったわ。残されたのはメス1羽だけ。その時点で彼女は地上で最も孤独な生き物になった。名前はマーサー。
That's really
北ア
sad.
メリカを旅する鳥たちの最後の1羽でありながら、ただの一度も空を飛ぶことができなかったカゴの鳥。結局29年で彼女はその命を終えたわ。1914年9月1日午後1時。
Why does she know this? Is she, you know, of course she says she hates animals, so I guess she means more humanity if that's the case.
一つの種
Seems
が
like
終
she
わる
really
時間
does
が
care.
ここまで正確に残っている例は今のところこれだけよ。
The story of 5 billion deaths had finally come to an end. The birds had been swallowed up by the machinations of human civilization. Kamari had attempted to show her sympathy for the lost species, but the emotional impact had been clearly lost, all but on
意外
Souyjuro.
できるだけ私的に語ったつもりだけど受け悪いみたい。山育ちのあなたには憤慨物の話だと思ったの。
いや、すごい話だったけど、その整理がつかなくて、当時の人たちは自分たちの手で減らしておいたのに、 なんで最後は保護したのかって。
Kumari stared blankly at him, eyebrows raised high. What he likely meant to ask was why humans would protect the last of a species they themselves had hunted into extinction. Kumari had hardly be blamed for her bewilderment. Having been raised in a city, she failed to recognize the danger inherent to him in his cluelessness. He felt neither anger towards humans for their base selfishness nor sympathy for the birds, who remained in their natural habitat even at the cost of their lives. His upbringing had not provided him with the necessary sense of self-righteousness to produce feelings in either direction.
相変わらずよくわかんないやつ。まあ私が言いたかったのは、どんなに強く美しく見えても居場所から追われた生き物は儚いってこと。しずきくん、あなたが見た鳥はその最後の一羽かもしれないよ。
And with that, their idle conversation came to an end. It was nearly time for their shifts to begin. The soldier was the first to head
ら
off.
しくない。何熱く語ってたんだろう私。
Kamari remained in the park after Souyjuro left. Martha, the last of her species. She had not been referring to the blue bird when she mentioned Martha, but
やめやめ。珍しいから特別視するとかバカみたいだし。
she rubbed the back of her head, apparently angry at herself for getting involved in something that was none of her business. She and Souyjuro were not even in the same class at school. He was a total stranger as far as she was concerned. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say they're friends either, but acquaintances at the least. The more something bothered her, the more she felt compelled to investigate it. It was a personal quirk of hers, and the only reason she had gotten so worked up about the passenger pigeons. Kamari's well-groomed brow furrowed. She had only spoken to Souyjuro to make sure he was doing okay at the Mad Bear. Or maybe it was that she had been strangely drawn to him. The more they spoke, the more she felt drawn to him.
まあ見てて頼りないってのが一番だろうけど、話してみるとしっかりしすぎてるのよね彼。
Amidst her muttered complaints, she recalled their conversation upon parting.
で、少しは街に慣れた？
To which he had given a weak shake of his head.
全然。何にせよ覚えなくちゃいけないことが多すぎて。
He was trying his best to keep up with the overwhelming amount of new information every day. However, despite his apparent naivety and frailty, he was in fact trying to learn everything he could about his new surroundings. But at the same time, there was no reason it needed to be so overwhelming in the first place. It was only due to his own naively subordinate frame of mind that he felt compelled to memorize each and every detail.
どうだろう。素直っていうのはちょっと違うと思うよ。単にそれがいいことか悪いことかまだ分かってないだけかもしれないし。
He awkwardly claimed.
そうね。でももしかしたらそもそも。
Kamai stopped herself, mid-train of thought, deciding to instead wave goodbye and take her leave. She sighed aloud every time she replayed the scene in her head. Work at the convenience store started in 5 minutes. She gave herself a light slap on the face in an effort to forget their conversation. She reminded herself that she had neither the energy to worry about it, or about other people's problems, or the obligation to do so. She had her own concerns, saving up enough money for college, for example. Fighting against her parents' opposition every night was draining enough. There was no room for burdening herself with other students' issues.
でももしかしたらそもそも。
It was not like her to get so tongue-tied. She thought to herself under a strange smile.
ほんとはっきり言ってやればよかった。
Is that what
あ
she's
なた
hung
は
up
単
about?
にそういうのに関わる気がこれっぽっちもないんじゃないのかって。
He really did annoy her. Now in a thoroughly bad mood, she left the park in a huff. Wow. Everybody hates Souyjuro. Everybody hates Souyjuro. I forgot. This is a CG. When Soujuro entered the drawing room after work with a gift of sardines for his roommates, he came face to face with Alice sitting on the sofa.
Yeah, こんばんは、アリス。
The sense of familiarity to be able to say I'm home when entering the mansion still eluded Soujuro. He headed straight to the kitchen to fill a bucket with water to keep the sardines fresh. But the icy stare on his back sent him anxiously to the refrigerator instead.
台所にバケツはダメなんだな。
Calmly accepting the change in plans, he shoved the sardines into the fridge and peeked back into the
アリ
drawing
ス
room.、
青崎は？
さあ、自分の部屋にいるか出かけているんでしょう。
Her reply was curt. He nodded and got to work cleaning the kitchen. There was nothing in particular he wanted to say to her. He also sensed that it would not be a good idea to start up a conversation needlessly. So he tidied up the sink area, washed the cutting board, and wiped down the knives. Wiped down the knives and put away the cutlery so they could be easily found. Her black eyes monitored every action in this streamlined workflow, a rhythm that even the most seasoned housekeeper would be envious of. He would surely notice her gaze before too long. He bent over to store a large pot under the sink when it happened. As he began to stand back up, he locked eyes with Alice, and then... Oh, I guess that's Robin. Before he could make another move, he felt something slam into the back of his head. A bright shock of blue. He knew what it was without looking. It could only be the match's blue Robin.
洋館に戻ってくるなり、コマ撮りに呼び出される。
Soujuro muttered under his breath. It was a rare situation that made Soujuro feel like complaining.
ほぞ、ちょっとそこに座れっす。
The robin chirped in its shrill tone. You see, this little creature that loved to attack Soujuro was the greatest of the mansion's many wonders. And with good reason.
舐めてるっすね。自分コマドリだって舐めてるっすね。ところで、鶏鍋ってどういうことっすか？それ美味しいっすか？今度見舞ってほしいっす。
Like so. Soujuro had an inkling of what the bird was getting at. For someone raised in the mountains, this is an utter nightmare. Animals are not supposed to be able to talk. Then again, having lived in the mountains for over a decade, he did sometimes feel like he could understand what birds were trying to say. He knew it was just his imagination, but sometimes he thought they even saw him as a friend. That was not the case with this bird. Soujuro had a realist attitude towards wild animals as a result of being so familiar with them, in contrast to the ever mysterious humans who lived in the city.
しかし、現実だ。
As much as he wanted to deny the reality he was facing, he could not help but recall Kumari's story. She had said to try and be nice to the bird the next time he saw it. According to her, any rare or one-of-a-kind creature must accordingly feel very lonely.
座れって言ってるのに仕方っすか？あーでも椅子ないっすねここ。じゃあ立ってるっす。小坊主だけに廊下に立ってるのがお似合いっす。あれ？今はうまいこと言ったんすかね自分。
The bird perched itself on the telephone receiver, seemingly worn out from all the flapping. Soujuro was dumbfounded. Listening in silence to the bird's chatter was his way of expressing his denial.
自分長いっす。プロイ歴長いっすよ。マイ女神の頃からアリスさんに仕えてるっす。なんで青いかとかどうでもいいっす。特技はズバリ探偵役と被害者役。でも探偵である自分が真っ先にコロコロするんで、誰が自分を殺したか結局誰もわからないっす。
プロイ？待ってくれ。それには聞き覚えがある。
Soujuro.
プロイ？待ってくれ。それには聞き覚えがある。プロイって何なんだ？
何なんだと言われても困るっす。 エロいとか役いいとかの最上級じゃないですか。
Thusly, the conversation began between the two most powerless residents of the Koji estate, humankind and birdkind, able to understand one another after all. Souyjuro was tired of letting the bird get to him, fully aware that ignoring it took more energy than it was worth. But with a sense of resignation, by the time he finally did make an attempt to interject, both parties' guards were firmly down. Souyjuro was focused on how rare the bird was, while Robin was focused on his showdown with his rival that was to be eliminated at all costs.
いいっすよ、細けいことは。そんなことよりマイ天使アリスさんの話をするっす。
なんとアリスって天使なのか。
It was an impressive sign of progress that he did not need to ask what an angel
いい
was.
っす。自分にとって天使のような存在ってことっす。下界の喧騒とか自分の言葉をガン無視するところとかマジ天使。アリスさんは神聖不可侵にして冷酷非道、マイ女神であったところの母君とはちょっと毛色が違うっす。正直母君ちょっと育て方間違ったっすね。
そうか、そりゃアリスにもお母さんはいるんだよな。この家にはいないようだけど。
イエス、悲しいことに見まかられたっす。あの頃は前衛の鳥が鳴いたっす。アリスさんに負けないぐらい美しかったっす。後でアルバムとか見るっすか？
いや、そういうのは本人の許しがないと。
I'm teasing. Souyjuro said earnestly as he tilted his head. The reason for his unease was also due to the fact that he had grown more interested in Alice than before. Despite his detached and passive attitude, he was still a young man like any other after all.
イエス、それはそうっすね。お前シャバ像の割にいいこと言うっす。人の過去花とかみだりにしちゃいけないっす。ところでアリスさんの子供時代の話とかしていいっすか？自分シャバ像の知らねえアリスさんを赤裸々にアピールして精神的上位に立ちたいっす。
あ、いや、だからそういう話は。
安心しろっす。アリスさんには黙っておいてやるっすから。
He's so British.
まずはあれっすね。自分とアリスさんが初めて出会った時のメモリーを聞くっすよ。アリスさん、ああ見えて友達一人しかいなかったっすから、もっぱら自分が話し相手っつうか。ほら、壁相手にカコーンカコーンってピンポン玉打ち返すゲーム、あんな感じっす。アリスさんのメモリーはおよそ14年分。じゃあ1年目から行くっすよ。
いや、だから
行くっすよー。もう誰も自分を止められないっす。
Excuse me. Oh my goodness. This bird was trouble. Excuse me. The word bird brain had taken on a whole new meaning to Souyjuro. If he were struck here listening any longer, he had the feeling he might hear something he would not be able to unhear.
すまない。そろそろいいかな。
With a wave of his hand, he attempted to flee the attic to the attic above the second floor.
ここからがいいところなのになんで猿っすか？スカーレット・オハラっすか？激動の主人公気取りっすか？そのあたり自分なんか納得いかないっす。まだうちに入ったばかりの新参者がなんでアリスさんの視点を独り占めしてるっすか？許せないっすけど、その秘訣を教えてほしいっす。切実に。自分本気出したらすごいっすよ。
何？君、今のはどうい…
だからアリスさん好きあらばお前を見てるっす。思い出したっすよ。そもそも自分熱視線でサーチされてるからって突き上がる中を釘刺しに来たんす。だいたいその字は何度も自分に助けられてるっす。アリスさんの命令がなかったら今頃その字鏡の中でおだぶつっす。これなんすかね。人間の感情とかわかんないっすけど、魚辺に里とか書くっすかね。
助けられてるって俺 俺が
まあ殺そうとしてるのもアリスさん好きどに。アリスさんはこう言ったっす。彼が鏡の中に迷い込みそうになったら助けてあげて、危険なものには近寄らないように誘導もしてあげて。ええ、でも思い上がらないことにしずきくん。めちゃくちゃ
Oh. Oh. It happened in a flash. With a swift, unhesitating strike of her hand, Alice squashed the bird right then and there as it sat on the telephone receiver stand in the foyer. Her pressed palm continued to pin it down. The bird's crushed form resembled a bright rubber ball, like what a child might play with.
アリスさんくらいっす。そして痛い。体中の血液がくちばしからこう右方向に流れていく感覚とか。
The bird raised a mighty uproar.
これの言うことは気にしないで。
I've never seen her look like this. Oh my goodness. Alrighty. Alice returned to the drawing room, taking the bird with her. Her dark silhouette, cloaked in shadow, was complete opposite of the gaudy little bird. Souyjuro folded his arms as he stood alone, no less confused than before, and he
こう
whispered,
してますます疑問は増えていくのだった。
up at the night sky, visible through the skylight. Alrighty. Wow. Goodness. Okay. What time is it right now? It's 10. It's definitely 10, that's for sure. Almost 3 hours. Wow. Yeah, almost 3 hours. That's insane. Alrighty. Well then, you know what? Now it's as good of a time as any to end it. I really don't want to because I want to continue, but I should stop now so I don't get over my head. So, yeah, no, shoot. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate it to whoever's here, or if there's anybody here. But yeah, no, I'll see you guys in the next video or next stream. You know, whichever comes first. Watch the Invincible.